Hi, Peter Boolkah here, and welcome to today's edition of the Transition Guide. Now today I want to talk to you about the economic recessions and the different kinds of economic recessions that are out there, and more importantly the impact of each. So there's been a lot of talk about COVID-19, the governments across the world going into recession, and more importantly, what kind of recession can we really expect to experience? And nobody knows yet. So we've got four types of recession. Most people talk about three, but there's actually four. The first one is the V-shape. Now when we talk about the V-shape sort of recession, what we're talking about a fast decline and a fast recovery. And by the way, when we're talking about recessions, companies don't necessarily follow recessions either. So although an economy may go into a recession, a company may experience a totally different pathways. Some companies are recession-proof, others are not. So bear in mind, you've got to look at what your company's going through as well as the market. So V-shape, as we said, fast decline but fast recovery. Great example was the early to mid 1950s, where various Western countries went through that fast decline but also had a very quick come out. We've got the W, and that's what we call the double dip, hence the W. Double dip is you come out of it, you go down sharp, you come out, you may sort of have that 1 quarter of sales growth, 2 quarters of sales growth, and then it dips again, and then you come out. Great example of that was the 1980s. 1980s was a great example across the world where we had numerous double dip contractions, we had recessions. Now the challenge with double dip is this. The killer is you contract, then you grow again. But imagine when you're starting to scale your business up and you're growing again, you're chucking money at it because getting started again costs money. So you can imagine the businesses that weathered the storm, started to scale back up and had another storm. That wiped so many businesses out because they had their cash tied up, weren't expecting a second recession. Boom, it came, totally took them out. So this is where cash conversion and cash conservation is so important. You've got to make sure that you don't hold too much stock. You don't make sure your money's tied up in assets, etc. You need your money to be liquid when you go into recession so you can weather a storm, because it may well be that you have a double dip. We don't know. Then you've got the U. Now that's a more protracted. So you have your decline, you have your fast drop, but then you have a long contraction period. It is actually long and miserable, and you don't quite know when you're going to get out of it. And that could be a couple of years. So it's a really tough economic winter, and then you come out. So you have a good recovery over time. Great example of this kind of recession is the 1970s. And especially in the UK, what we had is we had a period where we had really high inflation. I mean, we're talking about over 10%, 13, 14, 15% plus, which meant that people ended up losing their houses. You had high unemployment. Because it was such a protracted period, people just lost their jobs. It was just absolutely tough. But more importantly, people were cutting down people's hours. So not only did you have high unemployment, but you had people on a 3-day working week. And they just struggled to make ends meet. So many people actually went bankrupt during that period. It's a tough. And then you've got the final one, which a lot of people don't talk about because it's not very common. And that's the L-type recession. And that's when it contracts, but it flatlines when it contracts. And that's the toughest. So a great example would be Japan. 1990 Japan, if you look at it, they had an asset price bubble. So it was just a ridiculous. Prices of property, etc. was just stupid. And then it just crashed. But the challenge is it crashed and then you had huge deflation. And when you look at the whole sort of Japan situation, they never ever returned to their post-war GDP rate. So they've never ever recovered from it. They've just been in one period of contraction. And that's a tough thing for government and a business as well, because you just don't know when you're going to come out the other end. So remember, your business may not necessarily follow the economic sort of pathway of a country. You may have your own sort of bubbles, etc., that allows you to come out. So companies and businesses often can have separate recessions of their own. And it doesn't necessarily tie in to what's happening in the economy. So bear that in mind, because the last thing I would like you to do is saying because the country is going into an economic V-shape or a W or whatever shape recession, that you're going to follow suit. In fact, there are so many companies out there that as a country goes into its recession, those companies do phenomenal business because they are taking full advantage of the opportunities that exist during these periods. You just need to understand the model, and then more importantly, the impact it has on your business. Now, if anything I've discussed today resonates with you, you want to talk about your business, you want to talk about the opportunities in a recession, because it isn't doom and gloom. Some of it is absolutely phenomenal. I've got clients right now that are super excited by the whole thing around the recession, because they get out there to expand their business and for a lot cheaper than they would do at the height of a market. I mean, they always say that the best way to grow £1 million business is to buy a £1 million business for £1. And that's what a lot of people are going to do now, whether it's companies for cheap, whether it's assets for cheap, it's going to be shopping for the prepared. So as I said, if you want to look at how you can take advantage of this situation, head over to Boolkah.com and get in touch. And if this has really sort of benefited you, you found great use in this, please do me a favour and share it with others. And also, please comment. I don't get enough feedback, and I love to know what you're thinking. I want to have your questions. I want to be able to answer your questions and add value to you and add value to everybody else. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And remember, failing to learn is learning to fail. And please stay safe.